I am Oliver Grant, 24 years old, living in a small, charming apartment in Madison, Wisconsin. I recently graduated with a degree in sociology, and now I work as a teaching assistant at the local university. My job mainly revolves around analyzing human behavior, delving deep into memories and the factors that shape an individual. I often spend hours in class listening to students share their childhood experiences, then explaining how those memories influence their current decisions. It's strange, isn't it? I can dissect other people's psychology with ease. But when it comes to myself, I've never stopped to question the shadows in my own past. Perhaps because my life has been so stable, so ordinary, at least on the surface. But deep inside, there's always something lingering, like a cold draft slipping through the window cracks every winter. Madison in winter is a breathtakingly beautiful picture, yet chilling to the bone. Snow falls heavily, blanketing everything in white, turning familiar streets into a silent, solitary world. I clearly remember the winters of my childhood, when we lived in my parents' old house on the outskirts of the city. Our home was on a quiet little street lined with towering pine trees on both sides. Every Christmas, my parents would decorate the house lavishly. Soft yellow lights glowing from the living room, the aroma of baked cookies filling the air, and gentle holiday music playing softly. Those were the warmest moments, when the whole family gathered by the fireplace, telling jokes and opening gifts. But even in that coziness, there was always a silent shadow lurking outside, as if reminding us that not everything was perfect. The first time I saw the old man, I was about 7 years old. It was a frigid Christmas night, with snow flurrying lightly under the hazy streetlights. I was sitting by the living room window, my nose pressed against the glass, waiting for Santa Claus, or at least imagining him in my childlike mind. The lights from our house spilled onto the street, creating a golden glow. And then across the road, right under the old pine tree, I saw a figure. A tall, thin, elderly man in an old, worn, long coat with a knit cap pulled low over half his face. He stood perfectly still, unmoving, his gaze fixed on our house, not peering through the window but staring directly at the home itself, as if waiting for something. My heart pounded, not from fear but from curiosity. Who is he? I wondered, but didn't dare say it aloud. I couldn't tear my eyes away. He didn't approach, didn't knock, didn't call out to anyone. He just stood there like part of the winter landscape, a living statue amid the white snow. The wind howled through the branches, snow swirling around him, but he remained motionless. A chill crept into me, not from the weather, but from that silence. It made me uneasy, as if he were waiting for me to do something wrong. Finally, I ran to the kitchen, tugged at my mother's hand, and pointed outside. "Mom, there's an old man out there. He's been staring at our house." My mother, Carol, was stirring a pot of hot soup. She paused and looked in the direction I pointed. Her face changed briefly. A worried crease appeared between her brows. She pulled me away from the window, drew the curtains, and said softly but firmly, "Oliver, don't look anymore. He's a dangerous man. Absolutely do not go near him or be curious about him, understand?" I nodded, but her words etched deeply into my young mind like a knife. Dangerous? Why? He just looked like a lonely old man. But children believe their parents unquestioningly, right? From then on, the image of the old man became tied to a vague fear, an unnamed unease. Whenever I thought of him, I imagined horror stories. He was a child abductor or a ghost from the past. The next year, Christmas came again, and the old man reappeared, still in the same spot, under the pine tree across the street. I was now 8, a bit older, but the fear remained the same. I peeked through the curtain gap, my heart racing. He stood there all evening, tireless, unmoving despite the heavier snowfall. My father, Stephen, noticed me sneaking glances and pulled me into his arms, whispering, "Remember what Mom said. Don't pay attention to him. He's not a good person." I asked, "But what bad thing did he do, Dad?" He shook his head, avoiding details. "That's adult business. Just stay away from him." That warning covered my memories like a thin layer of ice. I started avoiding the window, pretending he didn't exist. But deep down, I knew he was there, and his silent presence made me shudder. Over the years, the scene repeated like an annual ritual. Every Christmas, as snow began to fall and the lights were turned on, the old man would stand across the street. I grew year by year. It was always the same. He never came closer, never knocked, never called out, just stood silently, gazing toward our house with eyes I didn't dare meet. I unconsciously kept my distance, closing the windows tightly, drawing the curtains earlier, even avoiding playing in the snow at night. I believed that was the only way to stay safe, as if looking at him too long would cause something terrible. That fear wasn't a sudden nightmare, but something smoldering, like an old wound that occasionally throbbed. As I grew older, I tried to treat the old man's appearances as commonplace. In my teenage years, I was busy with school, friends, and new interests. Christmas still came, and he was still there, but I no longer felt the same terror. It became a strange detail in life, like a crack in the wall you grow so used to that you ignore it. But deep inside, there was always a vague discomfort. Every Christmas, the festive joy was tinged with something incomplete, as if a piece was missing from the perfect family picture. I felt uneasy but didn't know why. Perhaps because the old man had become a symbol of the fear instilled in childhood with no clear origin. Now at 24, I still carry those memories. As a teaching assistant, I lecture students on how memories shape people. I tell them about the theory. Memories aren't objective truth, but stories we tell ourselves. But I've never applied it to my own life. The old man across the street. Why did he stand there for so many years? Why did my parents call him dangerous? And why, even as an adult, do I still feel a vague fear whenever snow falls? Lately, as winter approaches again, I've been thinking about it more. I'm sitting in my small office at the university, looking out the window as snow begins to fall. The hazy streetlights remind me of those old Christmas nights. I wonder, is the old man still there? Or has he vanished? The thought makes my heart beat faster. Not from fear, but from anticipation, as if a secret is waiting to be uncovered. One day, as I was walking from the parking lot to my office, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, weak sunlight filtered through the trees, and I happened to glance across the street. In the far corner, under the canopy of an old oak tree, there was a figure, tall and thin, wearing a long coat and a knit cap pulled low. My heart skipped a beat. It can't be, no way, it's that old man, I thought. But then the figure turned away and disappeared around the corner. I shook my head, telling myself it was just an illusion. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, while I was sitting in the cafe across from my rented apartment reading a book, I saw him again. Through the fogged-up glass window on the opposite side of the street, an elderly man stood motionless, gazing toward my building. Not directly at me, but generally, as if waiting for something. I held my breath, trying to observe more closely. Wrinkled face, silver beard, slow gait. Exactly like the old man from my childhood. He didn't approach, didn't do anything. He just stood there for about 10 minutes, then turned and walked away. My heart raced wildly. Just a coincidence, I reassured myself. But the feeling of being watched gradually returned. It was no longer a child's fear. Now it was the wariness of an adult. I started paying more attention to my surroundings, checking the windows before bed, glancing carefully in the rearview mirror while driving. Am I being paranoid? I wondered, but deep down I knew I wasn't. The incidents kept repeating. Once I saw him from afar on the other side of the campus fence, his gaze directed toward the lecture hall as if searching for someone. Another time, near my apartment, he lingered under the streetlight in the evening, standing silently like a shadow. He always maintained a certain distance, not close enough to draw obvious attention, but enough for me to recognize his presence. He didn't follow me, nor did he try to approach. He simply appeared in my field of vision quietly, then vanished like a fleeting ghost. I asked myself many times, is this just coincidence? Or is he really watching me? I tried changing my routine, taking different routes to campus, switching cafes, but he still appeared randomly yet regularly. Once, while teaching a class, I glanced out the window and saw him in the far corner. My heart tightened, and I nearly lost my train of thought in the lecture. Does he know my schedule? The thought sent chills down my spine. I began observing more closely. I took photos from a distance with my phone, zooming in to see his face clearly. It was him. Older, thinner, with a slower gait. Longer silver beard, deep-set eyes. No longer the old man from childhood, but still him. His repeated presence left me confused and unsettled. At first it was anger. What does he want? Why won't he leave me alone? Then worry. What if he really is dangerous? I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was affecting my life. Sleepless nights, irritability with students. One evening, lying in bed, I thought, I have to confront it. I can't let him control me like this. One day, I mustered all my courage. It was a winter afternoon with light snow flurrying and the air piercingly cold. I saw him across from my apartment, standing motionless under the streetlight. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging. I put on my coat, stepped outside, and crossed the street with a mindset that was both defensive and ready for confrontation. I told myself, stay calm. I'm an adult now. As I approached, he seemed to notice but didn't run. He just stood still, eyes averted. I stopped about 2 meters away, my voice trembling but trying to stay composed. Who are you? Why do you keep appearing near me like this? You're the one who's been watching me since I was a child, aren't you? The old man lifted his head, his pale face under the dim light. He didn't answer immediately, just looking at me with eyes full of sorrow. I continued. I remember you from when I was little, standing across the street from my house every Christmas. Now you're following me here. What do you want? If you don't stop, I'll call the police. The threat came out louder than intended. I expected him to resist, get angry, or at least defend himself. But no. He trembled visibly, eyes filled with fear, his body shrinking back like a cornered animal. I'm sorry. Sorry, young man, he whispered, voice weak and shaky. He bowed his head, stepping back slowly, hands raised as if to shield himself, as if one more step from me would make him collapse on the spot. I was stunned. No explanation, no defiance, just an instinctive fear reaction from a frail old man. He kept murmuring apologies, then turned and walked away quickly, limping through the snow. I stood there in the cold street, a feeling of emptiness and confusion rising. What just happened? My heart was still racing, but not from fear. It was bewilderment. The image of the old man, the dangerous figure my parents had taught me to avoid, didn't match at all. He was trembling, afraid of me. The fear that had been attached to him began to crack. In its place came something else, vaguer, closer to guilt. Was I too harsh? I wondered on the way home. That night I lay awake. For the first time in my life, I realized the man in front of me didn't align with what I'd been taught to believe throughout childhood. My parents said he was dangerous, but he shook like a leaf when facing me. Why? I began to wonder if the danger I'd believed in truly came from him, or from the story I'd been told when I was too young. That thought unsettled me. I tried calling my parents, but then stopped. What would they say? Tell me to stay away again? I decided to keep quiet, but the seed of doubt had been planted. From then on, I no longer saw the old man, at least temporarily. But his absence didn't bring peace. On the contrary, it made me more anxious, as if waiting for an impending storm. In the weeks following the confrontation, my life drifted in a strange state of suspension. I still went to work, taught classes, met friends, but everything seemed shrouded in a fog. Every morning upon waking, I unconsciously glanced out my apartment window, checking for that familiar figure across the street. The campus was the same. No longer the old man standing distantly under the trees. I told myself that perhaps he had truly been frightened by my threat and decided to stop. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. That silence only heightened the tension like the ticking of a time bomb. I tried to push the old man out of my mind. My teaching assistant job kept me busy, preparing lectures on collective memory, analyzing how society shapes individual perception. I stood in front of the class, speaking steadily. Memories are not objective truth, but stories we are told, and sometimes stories we tell ourselves. The students nodded and took notes. But what about me? My memory of the old man as a dangerous figure was now wavering. I recalled the moment he trembled, apologized, and backed away. That wasn't the behavior of a villain. Or was it? I began questioning myself. Why would my parents lie? They were always protecting me. But the seed of doubt had started to sprout. One evening, sitting alone with a glass of wine, I rummaged through childhood memories. Those Christmas nights, snow falling, golden lights. The old man standing there, never approaching. If he was dangerous, why did he never do anything? The thought made my heart race, anticipation building like reading a detective novel without knowing the ending. Time passed quickly, and this year's Christmas arrived. I drove to my parents' house on the outskirts of Madison, the familiar road blanketed in white snow. The chilly air seeped through the car vents, carrying the scent of pine forest. I tried to stay cheerful. This was a time for reunion, right? The old house appeared just like every year. Soft yellow lights glowing from the living room, the sparkling Christmas tree behind the window, and the faint aroma of baked cookies. I parked, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. My parents welcomed me with warm smiles. Dad Stephen clapped me on the shoulder. "Son, you're here? You look tired." Mom Carol hugged me tightly. "Come in, dear." I made chicken soup. The family atmosphere was peaceful and familiar, evoking the sense of safety from years past. We sat around the dinner table, talking about my work, the weather, trivial things. Dinner proceeded normally. Roast meat, mashed potatoes, and light laughter. I tried to forget the old man and enjoy the moment, but then unconsciously I glanced out the living room window. Through the fogged glass under the streetlight across the street, in that exact familiar spot, the old man was still standing there, silently gazing toward my parents' house just as he had for over 2 decades. My heart tightened. It was no longer instinctive fear, but a growing question mark in my mind. After the previous encounter, his image was no longer as terrifying as before. He stood motionless, frail and thin, his old coat fluttering in the wind. He's still there, I thought, blood rushing. Why? What does he want? The anticipation surged, as if a secret was waiting to be revealed. I could no longer contain the curiosity and frustration. I said, my voice slightly trembling, "Mom, Dad, I need to ask about the old man out there." My parents froze briefly. Spoons paused mid-air, their eyes reflexively glancing out the window before turning back to me. Dad's face hardened a bit. Mom bit her lip, as if they were weighing whether to continue hiding it or not. In that short silence, I sensed a tension I had never noticed before. The dining room air suddenly grew heavy. The howling wind outside sounded like a warning whisper. My heart beat faster. They definitely know something about the old man, I thought. Finally, my father, Stephen, sighed, set down his spoon, and spoke slowly. "Oliver, perhaps it's time you're old enough to know the full truth about that man." I held my breath, waiting. Dad began to tell the story, his voice low and grave, like recounting a dark fairy tale. Many years ago, that old man was a respected scholar in academia. His name was Leonard Grant. I jolted. Grant? Same as my surname? But Dad continued. He abused his position to plagiarize Martin Hale's research, an important sociology project that Martin Hale had poured his heart into. According to Dad, he and Mom were the ones who discovered and reported the misconduct to the academic board. "We were friends with Martin Hale," Dad said, eyes distant. "We found out Leonard was copying ideas and presenting them as his own. We couldn't stay silent. That led to an internal investigation and a major scandal. The press covered it. Public opinion was in an uproar. Then Dad recounted the darkest part. Martin Hale, having his work stolen, though later vindicated, couldn't withstand the public pressure. He fell into severe depression, Oliver. And then Martin Hale took his own life. Dad's voice choked. Mom sat beside him, wiping tears. I sat silently, a chill spreading through me. Ever since that incident, Dad continued, the old man has harbored deep resentment toward our family. He believes we ruined his life, and his appearances over the years are just the result of an obsession he can't let go. Mom added, voice trembling. He's deeply fixated, dear. He won't accept the consequences of his own mistakes. We tried to protect you from it. The details were specific enough, project name, year of the scandal, yet vague enough not to be immediately verifiable. But they perfectly fit the image of a dangerous man I'd carried since childhood. I listened in silence, realizing every piece of my childhood memory seemed to fit together flawlessly. The childish fear, the warnings, the old man's silence, all had a reason. The doubt that had just sparked after confronting him was quickly extinguished. They were right, I thought. He's a resentful, obsessive enemy. I chose to trust my parents, believing they had no reason to lie about something so serious. Dinner ended in a heavy atmosphere. We cleared the table, making small talk to dispel the tension. But outside, the old man still stood silently in the Christmas night, his shadowy figure faint amid the falling snow. And inside me, his image was once again solidified as a frightening figure, just as my parents' story described. I lay on my old childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. I shook my head, pushing them away. Just like from childhood to adulthood, I continued carrying that belief as an obvious truth without needing verification. But that night, sleep didn't come easily. The howling wind, snow tapping the window, and the image of the trembling old man mingled with the scandal story. Anticipation, drama, as if the story wasn't over yet. The morning after, I woke up with dark circles under my eyes, forcing a smile with my parents over breakfast. We opened gifts, watched old movies, and avoided mentioning the old man. As dusk fell, I drove back to Madison, the snow-covered road stretching white ahead. Wind whistled through the car windows, and I thought, everything is clear now. He's a resentful enemy. But why did my heart still race, as if waiting for a truth yet to be revealed? After Christmas, I returned to my rented apartment in Madison. The familiar routine gradually buried the lingering thoughts about the old man across the street. Waking early, brewing coffee, walking to campus. My teaching assistant job pulled me in, preparing lessons, lecturing, grading papers. Students asked about memory and behavior. I answered smoothly, like a machine. Evenings, I met friends at the bar, laughing over trivial things. The old man across the street. Just a faded memory, like an old movie long forgotten. A week passed. I checked the window every morning, scanning the campus as I walked. No old man there. Good, he stopped appearing, I thought. Then 2 weeks, nearly 3. That prolonged absence left me uneasy in a way I couldn't explain, as if a fixed detail in my memories had suddenly been erased. The old man had been part of my life for 24 years, whether as fear or a ghost. And now he was gone. It made me anxious, like missing a piece from a puzzle. I reassured myself, maybe he's moved away or simply no longer has the strength to stand in the cold. He was old after all, wasn't he? Trembling like that, probably ill. The thought brought a fleeting guilt, but I pushed it away. He's a bad person, I reminded myself, relying on my parents' story. One day after classes, I returned home exhausted. In the mailbox by the apartment door was an old envelope mixed with bills and ads. No sender's address, just my name written in shaky, distorted handwriting. My heart raced. Who sent me this letter? I picked it up, the thin envelope, yellowed paper. Inside the apartment, I sat at the table and opened it with slightly trembling hands. The letter was short, handwritten in faint strokes. Dear Oliver Grant, I am the man you have seen for the past 24 years, standing across the street. I am now in St. Mary's Hospital, gravely ill and may not survive. I express my wish to meet you once before I die. This is my final dying request. No threats, no conditions. Just one meeting. Leonard Grant. I read the letter over and over, emotions fluctuating between wariness, curiosity, and a vague unease. Leonard Grant? That name again? My heart tightened. He admitted to watching me. My mind echoed my parents' story. The scandal, the resentment, the suicide, along with the image of the old man trembling when I threatened to call the police. I set the letter on the table, confusion unrelenting. Part of me was wary, fearing this was a trap, a final manipulation. But curiosity grew, overpowering the doubts. Why did he want to meet me before dying? And if I didn't go, would it be a lifelong regret? That night I couldn't sleep. Wind howled outside the window, snow falling silently. The letter lay on the bedside table like an unanswered question. Inside me, something was quietly shifting, a secret about to surface. After days of thinking, I decided to go to the hospital. Not out of trust, but to end the question mark that had haunted me since childhood with my own eyes. I drove to St. Mary's. The hospital was cold, the strong smell of antiseptic in the air. I asked at the reception desk, voice steady. Room for Mr. Leonard Grant? They directed me to the third floor, room 312. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, machines beeping. The old man lay in bed, frail, far more aged than the figure across the street. Wrinkled skin, snow-white hair, oxygen tube. He opened his eyes, and upon seeing me, they lit up strangely, as if finding light at the end of a tunnel. Thank you for coming, he whispered, voice weak and trembling. I stood a few steps from the bed, wary. He continued, I wrote that letter, and I am your grandfather. I froze at those words, shaking my head in denial. Impossible. You've got the wrong person. My heart raced wildly, mind spinning. In that moment, an old memory flashed. When I was little, I once asked about my paternal grandparents, and my parents only said they had died long ago with nothing more to tell, quickly brushing it aside. Leonard weakly raised his hand. I won't force you to believe right away, but please hear my entire story. The decision is yours. I sat in the chair, hands clenched, listening as he spoke. His voice was raspy, halting but clear. 25 years ago, your parents, Stephen and Carol, deceived and took all my assets, then left, cutting off all contact. I gasped, but he went on. They were my son and daughter-in-law. They tricked me into signing papers, taking the house, the money. Your grandmother couldn't bear the shock. She fell gravely ill and soon passed. He paused, tears rolling down. I carried the pain of losing my wife and resolved to find them. When I did, I tried to approach, but they called the police, accusing me of harassment and getting a restraining order. That order prevented him from coming close, explaining, or defending himself to anyone. For 24 years, I could only stand from afar, silently watching them and seeing you grow up, never daring to come near or call your name. I listened to the whole story in resistance, fully aware that Leonard's account completely contradicted the one my parents had instilled in me since childhood. My mind was rigid. My parents as fraudsters? Him as my grandfather? Unease surged, not from pity but from fear that believing this would collapse all my memories and trust. The warm childhood, the teachings, faith in family, all lies? I stood up, voice firm. I don't believe you. This is just a desperate effort from someone nearing death. He didn't respond, just gazing at me sadly. Without another word, I turned and left the hospital, walking away outwardly resolute, though inwardly turmoil raged. Outside, snow fell heavily, wind cutting like knives. But what made me shiver wasn't the weather. It was the story I'd just heard, a truth I couldn't accept, yet couldn't erase from my mind. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with the details. Asset theft, restraining order, 24 years watching from afar. The words, "your grandfather," echoed in my head, tightening my chest. I tried to convince myself it was just the ramblings of a dying old man, desperate to drag someone into his final delusion. But why did his eyes seem so sincere? Why did his voice tremble when he spoke of my grandmother, the one I'd never even known existed? In the days following the hospital visit, Leonard's story refused to leave my thoughts. I tried to return to my daily routine, waking early, brewing strong black coffee, walking to campus in Madison's biting cold. My teaching assistant job pulled me in, preparing lectures on memory and social behavior, listening to students share their childhood traumas. I stood before the class, speaking steadily. Memories can be distorted by stories told by loved ones, and sometimes we live with a version of the truth that isn't real. The students nodded, taking notes. But what about me? In moments of silence, my head filled with images of the old man on the hospital bed, oxygen tube, rasping voice. I kept wondering if I'd been too hasty in rejecting everything. Each time I recalled Leonard lying there, pale skin, sunken eyes, trembling hands clutching the blanket, a vague regret began to surface. Should I have listened more carefully? At least asked for more details? The thought haunted me at night. I lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying the moment he called me his grandson. If it was true, then who were my parents? The ones who raised me with love, or fraudsters? Fear surged, not of the old man, but of the collapse of the world I knew. I tried calling home, but hung up before it rang. What would they say? Tell me he's dangerous again? The conflict left me anxious, like walking on thin ice, unsure when it would crack. Unable to bear the obsession, after 3 days of struggling, I decided to return to the hospital. I need to get clarity, I thought, driving to St. Mary's, intent on digging deeper. At least to close the story in a way I could accept, proving he was lying or finding evidence to put my mind at ease. My heart pounded as I entered the lobby. The familiar antiseptic smell turned my stomach. I asked at the reception desk, "Room 312, is Mr. Leonard Grant still there?" The nurse looked at me, checked the records, her face softening with sadness. "He passed away 2 days ago, sir. The body has been transferred to Evergreen Funeral Home nearby." The news stunned me. My mind went blank for seconds, as if I'd missed the final chance to speak or ask something. "He's gone?" I repeated, voice faltering. "Yes, sir, heart failure. I'm very sorry." Her words echoed distantly. I stood frozen, hands clenched. He was dead? No more hearing, no more questions? When I asked further, I learned Leonard's funeral was being held that very day in a simple, private manner. The nurse gave me the address. Emotions twisted inside me, regret, unease, and a strange sorrow. I left the hospital immediately and rushed to the funeral home, no time to weigh or rationalize. The car sped along snowy, slippery roads, wind howling through the windows, my heart drumming. What am I doing? Why am I going? But I pressed the accelerator harder. Evergreen Funeral Home was on the outskirts, a small, neat building, quiet and cold. No crowds weeping, no overflowing flowers, just a few staff in black suits and an elderly woman handling the arrangements. The atmosphere was silent, with only soft funeral music playing. I entered, the chill seeping through my coat, making me shiver. I stood at a distance, looking at Leonard's casket in the center of the room, adorned with a few simple white flower arrangements. A heavy feeling rose as I realized the man who had haunted me for 24 years had passed in utter solitude. No children or grandchildren, no friends, just alone. I recalled those Christmas nights, him standing across the street gazing at our house with sad eyes. Was he that lonely? My heart ached, regret surged. Throughout the service, the elderly woman, white hair, slow gait, glanced at me silently several times as if trying to confirm something. Her sharp eyes made me uneasy. The funeral ended quickly. Brief prayers, no long eulogy. The few attendees left quietly. After the rites concluded, the woman approached me, voice gentle but firm. "Could you step into the waiting room for a private talk? I think we need to speak." I nodded and followed her into a small side room, the faint scent of funeral flowers lingering. She closed the door and introduced herself. "I am Ruth Grant, Leonard's younger sister." My heart pounded. She nodded. "And you are Oliver, aren't you? My brother's grandson. Leonard told me so much about you, he even showed me photos taken from afar." I froze, then nodded confirmation, voice hoarse. "I am Oliver Grant." When I confirmed it, the old woman burst into tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "Oh Lord, I never thought you'd show up. Even less that my brother lived his whole life in humiliation and loneliness, only to pass alone like this." She wiped her tears, voice trembling. "He waited for you for years, Oliver. And now, you're too late." She sat down and told the story in a somber voice. "My brother was deceived by his own children, who took all his assets and cut off contact. Stephen, his son, your father, and Carol did it. They tricked him into signing papers, taking the house, the money. Your grandmother couldn't bear the shock. She fell gravely ill and soon died." She paused, tears flowing. "He carried the pain of losing his wife and resolved to find them. When he did, he tried to approach, but they called the police, accusing him of harassment and getting a restraining order. That order prevented him from coming close, explaining, or defending himself to anyone. For 24 years, he could only stand from afar, silently watching them and seeing you grow up, never daring to come near or call your name." The story she told matched every detail Leonard had shared in the hospital. The restraining order, 24 years watching from afar, the pain of losing his wife, no embellishments, no contradictions, all fitting like a complete puzzle. She showed me an old photo, a young Leonard beside a man resembling my father and a woman, my grandmother. "This is the proof," she said firmly. I listened in silence, initial denial gradually giving way to profound confusion. For the first time, I realized my entire memories and beliefs might have been built on a decades-long lie. The warm childhood, my parents' teachings, the image of the dangerous old man, all fake. My heart raced wildly, my mind spun. Aunt Ruth looked at me with reddened eyes as if waiting for a reaction. But I only nodded stiffly, stood up, and left the waiting room. Outside the funeral home, the snow fell thicker, wind howling through the bare trees, and I felt the world around me blur like a bad dream. I walked to the car, hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys and drove off without knowing where I was going. My mind was flooded with fragments. The old photo Aunt Ruth had shown me, Leonard's rasping voice in the hospital, and my parents' story of the scandal. I muttered a few words to reassure myself, but they sounded weak, unable to convince even me. After leaving the funeral home, I could no longer return to denial as before. What Leonard and Ruth had told me had planted a doubt large enough to ignore no longer. It was like a crack in the solid wall of my life, with water seeping through, threatening to bring everything down. I arrived back at my apartment in Madison as night fell, the streets blanketed in white snow. I collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the wall, trying to organize my thoughts. If it's true, then what? If my parents lied? The idea tightened my chest as if someone were squeezing it. I couldn't sleep that night, lying awake with the image of the solitary casket. The next morning, I woke early, brewed strong black coffee to clear my head, and decided I would investigate myself, but in silence, without telling my parents or sharing with anyone. I saw it as the only way to protect myself from a truth that could destroy the entire family. If it was wrong, I would forget it all, pretend it never happened. If it was right, I didn't dare think further. My first step was the most objective and hardest to fake: public real estate records. I knew property deeds couldn't be fabricated, especially in Wisconsin, where all transactions are publicly archived. I sat at my computer in the university office, pretending to work, but actually accessing the county database. My heart raced as I typed Leonard Grant into the search bar, filtering by over 20 years ago. The results appeared gradually, sending chills down my spine. Several properties, a house on the outskirts of Madison, a few small lots, and a savings account, had once been in Leonard Grant's name. Then, in an unusually short period, just a few months in 2000, everything was transferred to Stephen and Carol Grant. My parents took ownership after Leonard, I thought, blood rushing. The records showed they simultaneously changed residence, moving to the old house where I grew up, and severed all ties with Leonard just before I was born. I printed a few pages, hands shaking as I held the paper. I spent the entire afternoon digging deeper, forgetting lunch. Each document felt like a knife cutting into my trust. Why such a quick transfer? No signs of dispute, just clean signatures, but the short time frame raised suspicion. I recalled Ruth's words. They tricked my brother into signing papers. My heart pounded, anticipation building like reading a detective novel, but this was my real life. I shut down the computer, stepped outside for fresh air, light snow falling on the campus. Students laughed around me carefree while I felt my world crumbling piece by piece. I need to check more, I told myself, trying to stay calm. Next, I searched old legal records related to the restraining order. I knew that in the US, such orders are stored at local courts and some are accessible online. I spent the evening in the university library accessing legal databases. Typing Leonard Grant and restraining order, the results appeared. An order issued in 2001, prohibiting Leonard from approaching Stephen and Carol Grant within 500 meters. The restrained party wasn't a criminal or harasser, but Leonard, with the petition filed directly by my parents. In the filing, they accused him of persistent harassment threatening family safety. No specific evidence, just statements, but the court granted it because they had a lawyer. I read it over and over, unease surging. Why? If he was their father, why do that? The image of Leonard trembling in the hospital returned, and I wondered, was he trying to reclaim assets or just to see his child and grandchild? Doubt grew, like a gathering storm. I didn't stop. To cross-check my parents' story about the scandal, I turned to academic archives and old documents. As a sociology teaching assistant, I had access to university databases storing old newspapers and academic records. I filtered by the late 1990s, the years Dad mentioned, and searched for Leonard Grant, combined with academic scandal, plagiarism, disciplinary counsel. Results? Nothing. No investigation records or disciplinary actions against Leonard as Stephen had described. No articles, no counsel minutes, nothing. I sat there in the silent library, heart drumming. Everything my parents told me was a lie. I recalled that Christmas dinner, Dad's low voice telling the story, Mom chiming in. I had believed it then, but now, it was like a perfectly staged play. Anticipation surged. I was nearing the truth, but terrified of what was coming. To verify further, I decided to meet Ruth again. I called her, voice trembling. Aunt Ruth, it's Oliver. I need to meet and ask more. She agreed immediately, voice warm but sad. Come to my house, dear. I have many things to show you. Her home was in an old suburb, half an hour's drive from Madison. I arrived in the afternoon, snow stopped, but the sky still gray. She welcomed me with hot tea and led me to the living room filled with old books. She opened a dusty box. Inside were original documents. Stephen's birth certificate, clearly listing father as Leonard Grant. Handwritten letters from Leonard to her, describing being tricked into signing papers, and old photos. Young Leonard holding baby Stephen, then family pictures with my grandmother, the gentle woman I'd never seen. This is proof of the blood relation, she said, handing me an old DNA test confirming I was his biological grandson. I held them, hands shaking violently, emotions overwhelming. Each cold piece gradually fit together, and I had to face the undeniable shock. Leonard Grant was truly my biological grandfather, and my parents had seized all his assets before fabricating a story to sever all ties. I sat there, mind numb as if punched in the chest. Grandfather repeated, tears streaming. Aunt Ruth hugged me, whispering, My brother loved you so much, Oliver. He just wanted to watch you grow up. I left her house with a folder of copied documents, driving home in the darkness. Madison streets blurred under streetlights, but my world had changed forever. Once the truth was confirmed, the pain didn't hit immediately but spread gradually, thick and heavy. At first, numbness. I returned home, collapsed on the bed, staring at the ceiling without thinking. Then, bit by bit, it seeped in, especially when recalling my final hospital meeting where I had coldly denied and walked away. "I don't believe you." Those words echoed, stabbing my heart. He lay there, frail, eyes lighting up upon seeing me, but I turned my back. I was haunted by the thought that Leonard's final moments passed in solitude and despair, when the only person he wanted to see didn't believe him, didn't call him by any name. I whispered his name in the darkness, tears soaking the pillow. I imagined him alone, machines beeping, waiting for words that never came. Regret surged like crashing waves, making me sit up, gasping. For the first time, I realized cruelty doesn't always lie in violent acts, but in prolonged silence. My parents silently hid the truth. Leonard silently watched from afar, never speaking. And I, unknowingly, became a link in that chain of silence. I grew up in lies, avoiding him, fearing him, without knowing he was my own blood. I was part of that silence, I thought, and the guilt suddenly felt as heavy as the winter sky about to collapse. In the days following the full confirmation of the truth, I lived like a ghost in my own apartment. Mornings I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger's face, dark circles under my eyes, deep worry lines etched in. My teaching assistant job became a burden. I stood before the class lecturing on memory and human behavior, but my own words sounded hollow. "Memories can be manipulated," I told the students, voice monotone. But in my mind was the image of my grandfather on the hospital bed, eyes waiting for a word of acknowledgement that never came. The pain spread gradually, not loudly but smoldering like snow accumulating into a thick layer. Every evening I sat alone with the copied documents from Ruth, reading them over and over. Dad's birth certificate, the restraining order, the asset transfer records. They weren't lifeless papers, they were evidence of a stolen life. I imagined my grandfather signing those documents, trusting his son, then waking to a nightmare, losing everything, his wife, his child, and grandchild. How did he endure it? The thought kept me awake at night, heart pounding in the darkness. Anticipation, no longer from fear, but from boiling anger. Angry at my parents for the lies, angry at myself for being blind. I knew I had to act. I couldn't let the silence continue. After 3 days wrestling with myself, I decided to confront my parents directly. No prior call, no prepared words, just drive to the old house and let the truth burst out naturally. The familiar road to the Madison suburbs tugged at my heart, but today it felt endlessly long. Light snow fell, blanketing both sides of the road, wind howling through the car windows like a warning whisper. My heart raced faster as the house appeared. Soft yellow lights glowing from the living room, smoke rising from the chimney, the faint scent of burning wood. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked to the porch, knocking. When my parents opened the door, my sudden appearance clearly surprised them. Dad, Stephen, raised an eyebrow. "Oliver? Why come without calling? What's wrong?" Mom smiled, but her eyes flickered with worry. "Come in, dear. It's cold outside." I stepped inside, the familiar warmth enveloping me, the smell of baking, the crackling fireplace, but to me it now felt like a false facade. We sat around the dinner table and I tried to keep my voice calm, though my hands clenched under the table. I announced that the old man who used to stand watching their house every Christmas night had died. I spoke slowly, deliberately watching their reactions to confirm what I already knew. "He's gone, Mom and Dad. Leonard Grant." They froze for a moment. Dad paused mid-motion, water glass hovering. Mom lightly bit her lower lip, but quickly regained an unnaturally calm composure. No grief, no reminiscence, just a chilling indifference. Stephen set his glass down casually, voice even as if discussing a stranger. "Is that so? Good. He's troubled our family long enough." Carol nodded faintly with a thin smile. "From now on, we won't be watched or haunted anymore. You should feel relieved. It's a good ending. I sat motionless, each word piercing my skin like needles. They were speaking of Stephen's own biological father and my grandfather in a dismissive tone, as if he were merely a menace, a shadow worth erasing from memory. I felt hot blood rush to my throat, chest tightening as if crushed by stone. Years of haunting flashed through my mind, the nights he appeared in the winter dark, the somber hospital meeting, Aunt Ruth's tearful eyes, and the stack of silent documents like gravestones. I repeated in my head, heart drumming. A good ending? Really good for you? And in that moment, something inside me exploded. I stood abruptly, body shaking with rage, voice hoarse but resolute. Stop the lies, Mom and Dad. I know everything. Leonard Grant wasn't dangerous. He was my grandfather. Dad's real father. Stephen and Carol looked as if slapped in the face. They froze for seconds, faces paling. Stephen stammered, eyes full of confusion and panic. What did you just say? Who put that nonsense in your head? Did he trick you? He's always tried to destroy this family. Carol jumped in immediately, voice sharp and defensive like a reflex. Oliver, you've been trapped by him. Leonard was always like that, living on resentment, lies, and hatred. Don't let him ruin the life you have. They denied frantically, as if talking more would bury the truth. But I didn't let them continue. I pulled out the prepared stack of documents, the papers that had changed my world, and slammed them on the table. I gritted each word, voice hard as steel. This isn't just hearsay. This is the truth. The restraining order you filed yourselves. The suspicious asset transfers. Right when Leonard disappeared from my life. Birth certificates, archived records, timelines, all matching Ruth's and his account. You stole an entire family from me, a man's dignity, then fabricated a filthy story to cover your tracks. The room grew thick with tension. Stephen and Carol froze. Dad silently pulled the papers closer, flipping through them with trembling hands. His face drained of color, like losing blood. Carol collapsed into her chair, tears falling. But not from remorse, from panic at being exposed. They didn't resist or bow in admission. Stephen whispered, eyes vacant. You don't understand, Oliver. We had to do it for a better life. He wasn't a good person. Carol choked, clinging to maternal instinct. We just wanted you to grow up happy, safe, away from that dark past. I'm sorry, but I no longer saw them as my parents. Their words sounded like cheap scripts memorized to hide the truth for years. In that moment, I felt all my trust collapse. Nothing left but emptiness and cruelty. I looked at them one last time, voice icy cold, though my heart felt crushed. From now on, I'm no longer your son. Don't contact me. Ever. I turned, walking out of the house that was once my childhood haven. The place with Christmas trees, Mom's baked cookies, warm nights. Now only ghosts of lies and betrayal. Behind me, Dad shouted helplessly and angrily, Oliver! You can't do this. You're my son. Mom's voice joined, sobbing desperately, Come back, please, son! But I didn't turn. I opened the door and stepped out. Snow fell heavily, wind stinging my face. But I didn't feel cold. Only my chest, burning as if on fire. I sat in the car, hands shaking on the wheel, drove away, tears streaming, heart pounding in my chest, not because it was an ending, but because this was a beginning. A life without lies, without fear, without carrying others' burdens. The road back to Madison was hazy under the falling snow, the pale yellow streetlights casting long, stretched shadows. I drove slowly, trying to stay calm, but my mind spun with the images from moments ago. My father's ashen face, my mother's sobs, and the scattered documents on the dining table. How could they do that to their own family? I thought, tears welling up again. I pulled over to the side of the road for a moment, breathing heavily, wiping my face with my sleeve. The biting cold seeped through my skin, but the pain in my heart was even colder. I knew I had done the right thing, but why did it hurt so much? as if I had just amputated a part of my own body. After that confrontation, I completely cut off contact with my parents. No calls, no texts, not a single word. I changed my phone number the very next morning, deleted all old emails, blocked them on every social platform. I restricted every possible channel of connection, even changing my mailing address, though I knew they could find me if they tried. I never sought them out again, treating them as if they no longer existed in my life. In the early days, my old phone rang constantly. Calls from unknown numbers, pleading messages like, "Oliver, pick up, son. We need to talk." I turned it off, threw the old SIM card in the trash, and felt a cold emptiness spread through me. Not relief, but loneliness. The childhood home now existed only in memory, a memory tainted by lies. I sat alone in my apartment, staring out the window at the still falling snow, wondering, how will I live now? Work became my only anchor. I buried myself in teaching, preparing lessons late into the night, grading papers until my eyes ached. Students noticed the change. "Professor Grant, are you okay? You look tired." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a bit busy. Thanks for your concern." But at night, the obsession returned. I dreamed of my grandfather standing silently across the street, his sad eyes piercing through the snow curtain. I woke drenched in cold sweat. I tried to fill every void with busyness, running in the frigid early mornings, drinking black coffee so strong it burned my throat, and long evenings passing quietly with a solitary glass of wine. The anticipation was no longer about expecting something. It was fear. Fear of the lurking silence and loneliness ready to swallow me bit by bit. There was one rare occasion about 2 months later when Stephen and Carol showed up at my place. It was a drizzly afternoon, melting snow turning to muddy slush on Madison's streets. I was sitting in the living room reading to distract myself when the knock came. Peeking through the peephole, my heart tightened. My parents stood outside, coats soaked, faces weary. Dad knocked harder on the wooden door. "Oliver, open up, son. We need to talk." Mom sobbed, her trembling cries echoing through the crack. "Please, I'm begging you, son. Open the door for us." I stood frozen for seconds, blood rushing to my head, throat choking with rage. How dare they come here after everything they'd done? I took a deep breath and cracked the door open, just enough to face them without inviting them in. My voice was ice cold. "Go home, Mom and Dad. I don't want to see you." Stephen reached to block the door edge. "Son, you've misunderstood. Let me explain. Just 1 minute." I cut him off, eyes locked without blinking. "No need. I understand everything clearly. This is the final boundary. Don't come back." Mom cried louder, trying to push her voice through the gap. "Oliver, you're our son. Don't do this." I gripped the doorknob tightly, nearly shaking from holding back tears, then slammed the door shut decisively. Outside, they lingered. "Please, just hear us out one more time," Dad pleaded. But I didn't respond. I leaned back against the cold door, heart pounding as if to tear through my chest. They knocked a few more times. Then silence. Footsteps faded, blending with the pattering rain on the steps. I slid down to the floor, hands clutching my head, sobbing like a child who had lost something forever. That was the last time they tried. After that day, no more calls, no more letters, just a cold, vast abyss between us. Time passed, slowly but steadily. Winter melted away. Spring arrived with blooming flowers on campus. I began adapting, joining a running group, meeting new friends, even trying dating again. Life was no longer haunted as before. The pain remained, but it became part of me like a healed scar. 3 years flew by in a flash. I was now 27, still a teaching assistant, but starting to consider a PhD, stable job, independent life. And then I met Emily Parker. It was at a sociology conference on campus. She was a graduate researcher with long brown hair, gentle blue eyes, and a smile that made me forget all weariness. We talked about collective memory, debated cheerfully, and before the conference ended, I asked her for coffee. Emily was kind and composed, not loud, not judgmental. Our relationship grew quickly but steadily, from afternoon coffees to park walks, then evenings cooking together. Emily was the first person I opened up to after so many years. As we grew closer, I told her my entire past, from the old man haunting my childhood across the street to the truth hidden for decades. It was a rainy evening, pattering outside the window. We sat on the sofa with hot tea. I told it slowly, voice trembling when mentioning my grandfather, the confrontation, the cold void. I cut ties with my parents, I said, eyes on the floor. Emily listened without interrupting or judging. She just held my hand tighter, and when I finished, she hugged me. "You've been so strong, Oliver. If anyone deserves forgiveness right now, it's you." She comforted and encouraged me to face the wounds I'd carried too long, the sleepless nights, the haunting dreams. "The past doesn't define you," Emily whispered softly, placing her hand on my chest as if to soothe my tightening heart. "You've endured so much, but you're still here, still kind, still strong. You have the right to be happy, not by forgetting the past, but because you deserve a kinder future." For the first time in years, I felt truly understood. Emily became my support, helping me heal bit by bit. We visited my grandfather's grave together, bringing flowers, and I told her about him, the man I'd never called grandfather. Our relationship deepened. Emily understood me. She had her own past with divorced parents, but she chose to live positively. We spent time together, walking by the lake near campus, cooking favorite meals, short weekend trips. I felt life regain its colors, no longer lonely, no longer haunted. After a year of dating, I proposed to her by the lake at sunset. Emily cried with joy, hugging me tightly. We decided to marry, a simple wedding at a small church near Madison, only close friends and those who truly wished us well. No extravagance, no crowded guests, just about 50 people with simple white flowers and gentle music. I didn't send invitations to my parents. They were no longer my family. The wedding day arrived, sky clear blue, light breeze blowing. I stood before the mirror in a black suit, heart racing with anticipation. This will be a new beginning, I thought, smiling as I saw Emily looking like an angel in her wedding dress. As the ceremony unfolded in a warm and peaceful atmosphere, the priest giving blessings, friends clapping, laughter echoing, my parents suddenly appeared. They entered through the back door of the church, dressed simply but faces weary, aged more than 3 years ago. I spotted them from afar, and a wave of anger instantly rose. A choking sensation in my chest, blood rushing to my head, heart pounding as if to burst. Why do they dare come here? The thought flashed as I released Emily's hand, striding quickly down the aisle, voice gritted through breath. "What are you doing here? Leave. This isn't your place." Dad's face tensed. Mom stood behind, tears welling. But it no longer swayed me. I was about to step closer, but Emily gripped my hand tightly. "Oliver, calm down," she said gently but firmly. "Today is our day. If they've come to say something, hear them out, then decide afterward." She looked at me, eyes not just gentle but strong, like an anchor in the emotional storm. I paused, taking a deep breath. She was right. Today was our wedding, not a battlefield. I turned toward my parents, holding Emily's hand firmly, walking with her, not to forgive, but to listen one last time. We led them to a quiet corner beside the church, shaded by trees, with wind lightly rustling the leaves. The serene space contrasted the raging emotions inside me. Stephen and Carol stood facing us, eyes uneasy, faces more gaunt than I remembered. Dad spoke first, voice hoarse with emotion. "Oliver, we're sorry for coming unannounced, but we couldn't miss this important day. No matter how angry you are, we're still your parents." Mom cried, tears streaming down her cheeks, voice trembling. "Son, I just want to bless you. I don't want your life to begin with hatred." They didn't beg for forgiveness, but for a chance to speak. "We were wrong," Dad repeated, choking. "We won't make excuses, but please let us tell everything. Things you've never heard from our own mouths." I stood silent. In my chest, heart pounded like war drums. Part of me wanted to turn away, escape it all. But another part whispered, "Hear them out, at least once." Emily squeezed my hand lightly, eyes gentle yet steady. "You decide. I'll be here no matter what you choose." I looked at them, the two people once central to my childhood, now like strangers clinging to one last thread. Wind rustled Mom's scarf, and I realized my decision now would shape the rest of my life. Stephen was the first to speak. His voice trembled, completely unlike the firmness from 3 years ago. He paused, taking a deep breath as if gathering the last of his remaining courage. "We're sorry, son." The words "we're sorry" fell heavily. Stephen swallowed, eyes reddening. "We admit everything, from seizing the assets of my father to fabricating a false story to cut him off from his grandson, from your life." Carol sat beside him, tears streaming endlessly. Her hands clutched a handkerchief already soaked. "We were wrong, Oliver. Wrong from the start," she choked. "We told ourselves we were doing it to protect you, to keep you from being dragged into the past. But that was just how we justified our selfishness." They told it slowly, each detail like salt rubbed into old wounds. How they persuaded my grandfather to sign the papers with empty promises. How they left without looking back. And how they built the image of a dangerous man to cover everything they had stolen. Stephen's voice broke when mentioning my grandfather. "He was my father, but I chose money over family." I listened in silence, but inside there was not even a flicker of softening. Those apologies came too late, too lightly, like wind brushing over a wound festering for decades. Bitter pain surged as I thought of over 20 years when grandfather and grandson saw each other but could never acknowledge it. Those freezing Christmas nights, him standing across the street huddled in the snow just to catch a glimpse of me, the grandson he had never held, never called by name. I could hold it no longer. My voice burst out, shattered. "You're sorry." I gave a bitter laugh, heart racing wildly. "Do you think apologies can make up for anything?" I looked straight at them, each word tearing through the air. "Your lies stole the only chance I had to call Leonard Grant grandfather." My voice shook as memories flooded back. I met him in the hospital. He lay there, frail, just waiting for me to acknowledge him, to call him grandfather. But I turned my back, because I believed the story you told me. I took a deep breath, but tears still fell. When I was finally ready to face it, he was gone. Alone, quietly, without a farewell to the grandson he'd waited for all those years. The words poured out like a flood, carrying years of resentment. I recounted the final meeting, the way his eyes lit up when he saw me, his rasping voice trying to tell the whole truth, and the moment I denied it all. Emily sat beside me, holding my hand tightly. I felt her body trembling too. Stephen bowed his head. Carol sobbed uncontrollably. "We didn't know. We never thought it would turn out like this." But those words only made my chest ache more, not from anger anymore, but because everything was irreversible. Tension rose, suffocating. I knew if this conversation dragged on, I might lose control. I turned away, intending to lead Emily out, determined to end the past with a full stop. "That's enough. Let's go," I said, voice choked with unhealed hurt. But at that moment, an unexpected sound came from behind. Stephen and Carol collapsing to their knees on the cold wooden floor, as if every mask they had worn had fallen away. The thud of their knees hitting the ground made my heart constrict. My father no longer held his former hardness. He bowed his head, voice choked. "You're our son. Please don't turn away. Don't let it end like this. Give us one chance, just one, to make amends." My mother, the one who had always controlled her emotions like a skilled performer, now sobbed aloud. She clutched my legs, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "Son, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I let you grow up in darkness and fear and lies. We can't turn back time, but please let us do something to make up for it. Just one thing." I stood frozen, rigid, mind blank. They, the two people who had once been my role models, my refuge, now knelt at my feet like condemned criminals. I didn't know how to react. Carol looked up, turning to Emily, eyes grasping at the last remaining hope. "Daughter-in-law, please speak for us. You're the only one he trusts now. We just want to make amends. Even once." Emily was silent for a moment, then stepped beside me, taking my hand and squeezing it. Her eyes were full of emotion, but still calm. "Oliver, you don't have to forgive right away. No one is forcing you to forget the pain. But regret only means something if accompanied by action. Give them a chance not to talk, but to prove it. For your own sake, you deserve to be free from this burden." I turned to Emily. In her eyes was love, understanding, the only light on the dark path I'd walked. I took a deep breath, then looked back at my parents, the people who had sown hurt, now desperately begging to mend even a fragment. I thought of my grandfather, lonely across the street all those years. The man trembling on the hospital bed, waiting for a grandson he had never held. Perhaps he wouldn't want me to live in hatred, the thing that had silenced him for half his life. Finally, I spoke. My voice was hoarse, but each word clear. "Fine. I'll give you one chance. Just this once. But it has to be action, not tears, not apologies." I stepped closer, eyes fixed on them. "You must use most of the assets you took from Leonard to establish a charity foundation in his name. That will be the only acceptable apology, and the only way he can be remembered as a respectable man, not the harasser you called him." Without hesitation, Stephen nodded, tears welling. "We'll do it immediately. Leonard deserves for the world to know him. Not with excuses, but with real action." Carol choked, voice trembling. "Thank you, son. Even if you haven't forgiven us, I know. This is a chance we don't deserve." I said nothing more. Inside, the anger hadn't faded, but something in me began to release. Not for them, but for myself. Emily squeezed my hand tighter, as if reminding me, from here we would move forward. On a different path, full of hardship, but no longer carrying lies as baggage. Emily and I left the room without relief, just the feeling of setting down a burden carried too long. We returned to the wedding. Friends still laughed, unaware of the drama. I hugged Emily, whispering, "I almost lost my way. But you were there. Thank you, Emily." The ceremony continued, but inside me was a tangle of emotions, anger subsiding, but pain still smoldering. On our wedding night, we lay together. Emily stroked my hair. "You did the right thing, Oliver. I'm proud of you." But I lay awake, thinking of my grandfather. The next day, when the legal procedures were complete, quickly thanks to a lawyer Emily introduced, I held the documents establishing the foundation in Leonard Grant's name. Looking at the bold printed lines, I felt an emptiness mixed with pain, realizing some things could never be repaid, but at least the truth had finally been named correctly. The foundation would support academics, the field my grandfather pursued, and I knew he would be proud. But why did my heart still feel heavy, as if a part of me was lost forever? I sat alone in my small home office, faint spring sunlight filtering through the window, illuminating the stack of documents. Emily entered and hugged me from behind. "I know you're trying to act normal, but I can see the sadness in your eyes. Are you really okay?" I nodded, but my voice trembled. "I'm fine. It's just, it makes everything feel too real." She kissed my cheek and whispered, "This is the right step. Your grandfather would be so happy." We spent that afternoon reviewing the foundation's plans. Scholarships for sociology students, funding research on memory and human behavior. It felt like a way for my grandfather to live on, through the projects he had once dreamed of. But whenever I thought about it, the image of him standing across the street returned, and I wondered, if only he were alive to see this. A year passed after the wedding, and our lives changed in the most beautiful way. Emily and I welcomed a son whom we named Noah Grant. The arrival of the child brought us a new rhythm. Slower, warmer. Noah was born on a bright summer morning. His cries echoing in the delivery room made my heart pound with joy mixed with worry. I held him for the first time, that tiny, warm feeling bringing tears to my eyes. "He has your eyes," Emily smiled wearily, stroking my hair. From then on, days filled with diapers, midnight feedings, and baby laughter. I reduced my teaching hours to be home more. Emily worked flexibly remotely. Life no longer revolved around painful memories. It was mornings waking to Noah crawling clumsily, afternoons strolling in the park, evenings holding my wife and son as they slept peacefully. But sometimes, amid that warmth, a vague anxiety lingered, as if the past could return at any moment. My parents occasionally came to visit their grandson. The first time they called after the wedding, I hesitated for days before answering. "We want to meet the baby," Dad said over the phone, voice hesitant. I agreed, but with clear distance. They visited one Sunday afternoon, bringing gifts for Noah, a teddy bear and some children's books. I didn't greet them warmly, no hugs, no wide smiles, but I didn't turn them away. We sat in the living room. Emily held Noah for them to see. Mom stroked his hand, eyes welling. "He looks just like you when you were little." Dad sat quietly, nodding when Noah smiled at him. I maintained a silent distance, as I was learning to coexist with a truth I couldn't fully accept yet. They stayed an hour making small talk about the weather, the thriving foundation. When they left, I closed the door and sighed. Emily asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Maybe I am, in some way, but I still can't forgive." "Not really." She hugged me. "That's okay. Forgiveness doesn't come in a day. You have the right to feel that way, as long as you don't trap yourself in the pain forever." I understood I couldn't forgive yet, but I didn't want my son to grow up in absence and silence like I had, unaware of his roots. I watched Noah playing on the floor and thought of my own childhood, hidden secrets, haunting shadows. When Noah grew older, I would tell him about Grandfather Leonard, the foundation in his name, the mistakes of the past. Not to sow hatred, but to teach him about truth. When his grandparents visited, I let Noah interact, to laugh and play with them, to feel their love, even if for me there was still distance. The Leonard Grant Foundation continued steadily, supporting projects true to his spirit. We funded scholarships for underprivileged students, research on social memory, even annual workshops. I helped manage it, reading reports, and each time seeing his name on paper warmed my heart strangely. It became the clearest proof that truth had finally reclaimed its place. My parents contributed regularly as promised, perhaps their way of atonement. I didn't see them often, but knew they were trying. My life now was peaceful, no longer nightly haunted, but not fully forgotten. It was like a river learning to accept the bends of the past, sometimes rough, but still flowing forward. I still taught. Emily wrote books. Noah grew day by day. Evenings, we sat by the fireplace telling stories, and I felt fortunate. On a chilly Christmas morning, Emily, Noah, and I drove to the suburban cemetery to visit my grandfather's grave. Light snow fell, blanketing the roadsides. Noah, then 3, sat in the back, excitedly waving through the window, going to visit Grandpa, Dad. We brought white daisies, walking slowly on the thin snowed path. My heart tightened as always here, not from cold, but from lingering regret. The grave was the same, a simple stone marker engraved modestly, Leonard Grant. No flowery words, but heavy with meaning for me. We bent to place the flowers. Noah toddled forward, pointing at the stone. "Is Grandpa sleeping, Dad?" I knelt, wrapping my arms around him, softly replying, "He's sleeping, but he's always watching over you from very high up." The air was still, only wind rustling through the pines and our breaths turning to faint mist. I closed my eyes, whispering a prayer. Thanks to him for waiting, and a belated apology I brought every year. When I opened my eyes, I was surprised to see my parents already there. They stood on the other side of the grave quietly. Dad bowed his head, hands clasped. Mom dabbed tears with a handkerchief. They hadn't noticed us. Grandma and Grandpa are here too, Dad, Noah called out innocently, his voice ringing in the quiet scene. My parents startled and turned, eyes red. Seeing us, they paused for seconds, then gently turned away, as if avoiding our gaze. But I had seen it clearly, the remorse on their faces. I said nothing, nor stepped closer. Emily squeezed my hand lightly. 5 people, separated by a few steps, stood silently by one departed man's grave. No one spoke, but each present said what words couldn't. In that moment, amid the quiet falling snow and chilly breaths, past and present intersected. No dialogue, no complete forgiveness. Just a peaceful Christmas morning where hearts softened, and somehow my grandfather still connected us. Leaving the cemetery, we walked with Noah along the snow-dusted path, wind biting but my heart calmer. As we reached the gate, I stopped. Stephen and Carol were waiting there. They had left the grave before us but hadn't driven away, just standing quietly by their car, as if waiting for something they dared not hope for. I looked at them briefly, then at Emily. She nodded gently. I took a deep breath, stepped closer, and spoke, not with resentment, not coldly, but simply softly. Mom, Dad, would you like to visit Aunt Ruth? And if it's convenient, come over for Christmas dinner tonight? The offer stunned them both. Stephen looked up, blinking repeatedly as if unsure he'd heard right. Are you serious? He asked, voice choked. Carol covered her mouth, tears flowing again. Thank you, son. I thought I'd never hear those words again. Noah looked around confused, then cheered. Grandma and Grandpa coming for dinner? Awesome! I just nodded lightly. No further promises, no talk of forgiveness. Just one evening, perhaps the first step. Stephen and Carol nodded, then slowly got in their car, leaving ahead to prepare. I watched them go, heart still tangled but a little lighter. Emily squeezed my hand gently. You just opened the first door. The rest let time do its work. I nodded faintly, watching the snow continue to fall, pure white, cold yet cleansing. A new chapter was slowly beginning. That Christmas evening was simple but warm. We gathered at our home. Emily cooked traditional dishes, roast meat, mashed potatoes, cookies. Noah laughed and played with his grandparents, pulling Grandpa's hand to play toys, hugging Grandma while singing Christmas songs. I stood quietly watching the scene with indescribable emotions. Not full forgiveness, but acceptance. My parents sat by the fireplace, eyes sparkling as they watched their grandson. We ate dinner, talking lightly. No delving into the past, just the present. When they left, Dad patted my shoulder. Thank you for giving us a chance. Mom hugged me tightly. I love you. Always. I nodded, closed the door, and hugged Emily. You did it, Oliver, she said. That night I slept deeply without dreams. Looking back on the journey, I understand. Truth, no matter how painful, is worth hearing more than a lie stretched over a lifetime. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means daring to choose not to pass old wounds to the next generation. That's how I protect Noah, protect myself. By closing the past, not with resentment, but with the courage to face and release it. The story ends with an undeniable truth. Every family carries cracks, mistakes that can't be erased. But people, with hearts forgiving enough, always have the right to choose how to face, heal, and leave a more honest beginning for the next generation. I sit by the bed, watching Noah sleep peacefully in the soft yellow light. His breathing steady, serene. In that moment, I know my son will grow up without blindfolds of lies, without awkward silences and unnamed shadows. Noah will have truth, love, and won't inherit the pain I once carried. Life continues, not perfect, but warmer. And I smile,